All About Relationships is an engaging, lighthearted, and practical show designed to help people improve their relationships in meaningful ways. Hosted by Dr. Don Allen, a certified Gottman therapist, as well as an advanced trainer for the Institute. He is also certified in emotion-focused therapy. With over 40 years of experience in the field of psychotherapy, Dr. Allen is here to provide expert guidance on strengthening marriages, parent-child relationships, friendships, and more. Through insightful discussions, audience call-ins, and guest experts, viewers receive real-world strategies to enhance intimacy, communication, and overall relationship satisfaction. So now, please welcome the host of All About Relationships, Dr. Don Allen.
Well, welcome back. Hello, I'm Dr. Don Allen. This is All About Relationships, working towards ideal marriage and loving, lasting relationships. Well, I was just kind of doing my prep today, and I noticed this is show number 16 in the third season already. So that's pretty cool. We've been doing quite a few of these, really enjoy them, getting good feedback from you all. So thank you. Today, this was a tough one for me to prep. So I hope you enjoy it. And, when I come up with these, I kind of look at, what do people need to know in their relationships in general? I get that information from watching, TV. I watch it from, just a community and talking to people and stuff like that. But today, my title is The Truth About Wealth in Life. And why it's kind of a tough one is because, it's a little bit kind of out there. What is wealth? It's kind of philosophical. But one of the things we want to pay attention to in life is staying on the bike trail, meaning staying through life grounded and in a direction that's good for us and not getting out off of the bike trail into the weeds and down the levee and into the river. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and how to do that in a way that we enjoy it and have fun and rethink some of the things that gets us off track. One of the things I've talked about in past episodes is we drift out of where we should be. Do that in everything. Think about gaining a few pounds and eating too much fast food. Fast food tastes good, but is it good for you? And then after a while, does it really taste good? Or are we just eating it? So, we want to think about life and kind of how that works, not only in our relationship, but where we're headed, where we started, right? Those types of questions. So I always put some nice hook questions out there to just get us to start thinking about why this is so important. So here we go. So these are my questions. When you think about wealth and success in your life, what are you actually chasing? What are you actually looking for and looking toward and going toward, right? Have you ever chased your goals so hard that the tail started to wag the dog? In other words, you're so busy on one goal that you lose sight of the bigger picture. And then what does that look like, right? So I wanted to think about that as I talk to you all today, right? Have you ever gotten so busy in the minutia of life that you lost sight of what really matters to us most? Harry Chapin, a long time ago, wrote a wonderful song called Cats in the Cradle. And it really talked about how this person was so busy with working in their life that they didn't have time for their kids. And then when their kids got older, he realized he taught them how not to have time for him either. It's a really good song. You should go back and listen to it. It was a great hit back then, but it was a good song. So have you ever achieved success, but at the expense of what time and connection with friends and families would have afforded you? In business and marketing, the business people call that opportunity cost. The cost of doing this opportunity means you can't do that opportunity. So it's kind of that question I thought of when I put it up there. Have you ever defended your core values, but you've never really looked at your core values? What really is important to you? What matters most? What in the Gottman Institute we call values, beliefs, and ethics. How we roll, the compass we steer by. Okay, very important stuff. So anyway, I want you to think about these things while we go into our discussion section in the first part of our show. Okay. One thing I guess I've noticed in life in general is that we don't usually lose relationships because we don't care, right? We lose relationships because we drift and we get into the symptomatic problems that drift causes. Okay. So one of the reasons why I think that is we do lose these relationships because we start valuing the wrong things, and then the question becomes, what are the wrong things? Well, sometimes what those are is the shiny objects that we kind of see along the way that distracts us. And remember what I said about, media and stuff like that. People go to school and they're very, very, very savvy at targeting a population that they think are going to buy their product, and then creating a advertisement, creating a climate that makes us move towards it. One of my favorite things that I hear on television all the time is, I deserve it. I deserve this, I deserve that. What does that really mean? See, if you don't think about that, other people will think for you. You see what I'm saying? What is deserving? What do I think I deserve? Start with ourselves, but it happens, right? Um, what if you believe these things are doing to make your life better, but in reality, it makes the relationships with your partner and with people in your world less, right? So you actually get poorer in relationship, but more successful in other things. Okay. So I want to shift gears then. So now that we kind of are setting the stage for this really nice debate today, my question for you is, what is wealth? Okay, what is wealth? Well, I went to Merriam-Webster, right? Do the usual thing. And what they said was that wealth is the total value of an individual's entity or entity's assets, like if you have a corporation. So an individual or entity's assets, including cash, real estate, investments, minus all your liabilities, what you owe. Well, that's interesting because in that definition, what we're going to need to be when we get older is financially wealthy. But that's not the only thing in life, is it? It's important, but it's interesting that that's what they lead with Merriam-Webster. So the other things we start to look at is the secondary definitions. It also represents an abundance of valuable material, possessions, or resources, often defined as self-worth, beyond money, beyond wealth, or it can signify wealth of experience. I read in an article once that sometimes politicians will uh, look at how wealthy you are in terms of how you can pick up the phone or an email or text or something and make something happen. I remember hearing a story once where the Rat Pack, or I think it was Frank Sinatra, was making a movie, and he was able to call the president of the United States and get a battleship to go past where they were shooting. Well, some people, that's wealth, the ability to influence people to that degree. So sometimes people say, well, that's wealth, right? So very important to look at that. Other people talk about health and wealth. I will say to you that, and this is a firm belief of mine, if you don't have physical health, it really stops the show because a lot of the other things in the major life areas are seriously affected. Now, this is me, but I would even argue the first one, which is spiritual wealth. If you're spiritually off pitch, it's really hard. Now, I tend to be grounded spiritually with religion, but some people aren't. Okay, well, I'm not an influencer on religion, but what I would say is you need something that is kind of that spiritual compass for you. For some people, strong spirituality is going outside and really enjoying nature, say in the fall or in the spring. That can be wealth, you see. And some people, following the precepts or tenets of a religious belief is very grounding for them, right? But again, well, how do they report it? Well, a lot of people do that, report they're happier in life and they feel like they're more grounded. What I'm saying is you need to think about things like spirituality and health, because I think these are very important when it comes to the 8 major life areas we'll talk about. But in the broader definition, and kind of where I start, is that it includes non monetary assets like health, wealth, time, social status. Your children spell love Time. Trust me on that. They just do. And when you spend time with them, they feel more loved and more secure and those types of things. But that isn't just for your kids. When we're married, from attachment theory, we really, really rely on our partner to energize us and really give us that connection in the relationship that also affects positively our health and our spiritual nature. Okay. So it isn't just money, but money is important. And part of the problem is we need to balance these things. So how do we do that? What do we need to do in order to make those things happen well? Well, we're going to talk about that today. Okay. So what we need to do is look at how life changes throughout our life. What's important to us when we graduate high school might be very different for us when we start the workforce, or when we're 30 to 40 years old, or when we're 50 to 60. Or what about the people that are getting towards 60 plus that needs to retire? Well, what is wealth? Right now, part of the problem when you get to that age is that you need to make sure as you don't work, you have enough money for the decades ahead, right? But what about, enjoyment of life? What about, what some people, I don't, but some people call a bucket list. Boy, I want to do this before I'm off the planet. Well, those are really important. But I would argue to a lot of people, seeing what they want to see on the bucket list with their partner is not only essential, but it's spiritual for them. Think of things in your life that you've done. Maybe it's a holiday, maybe Christmas, maybe Thanksgiving. Sometime in your life that you got together with your friends or family, and it's really a highlight reel. It's really a snapshot of, wow, that was an amazing thing. That's what I call living. That's what I call being on the planet. That's wealth. When you are young, you are very wealthy with youth, right? I'm older. So my wealth may be the accumulated wisdom and knowledge of how life has been for me, but I don't have wealth in terms of youth. So what you have as wealthy in this moment will change in your stages of life. So that's where, we really want to take and set the stage for the rest of our show today, because I want you to slow down and I want you to look at not putting the cart before the horse, reestablishing your major life areas, and then doing it with your partner. So that's part of what we're going to do for today. Okay. Um, Now, the other problem is back to what happens when, and that is, advertising and money driven media really helps us weigh the notion of what success or failure. When we're in high school, think about what was really cool, what was really the trendsetter, who were the happening kids, who were the cool kids. Well, some of what made that happen was that the grown-ups have weighted what's important, right? And that's fine as long as we celebrate everybody, right? So yes, the big sports or the cool sports are great, but what about the kid who's winning on the bowling team? That may not be as big as football or basketball, but boy, we need to equally celebrate. But more importantly, the kid doing it is having fun, and they see the wealth of the support they're getting and the pleasure they're getting for representing their school in bowling, right? I was orchestra and liked to hang out with the band kids. The other thing I did was I was on the chess team. So, boy, are those nerdy. Okay. But they were wonderful for me. And I still remember the memories of that. The memories of that was wealth. You see, the memories of that was wealth. So, I'm creating wealth by doing things that I love. We need to keep focused on that, even if they aren't necessarily celebrated to the degree other things are. Okay, let me check my time. Nothing yet. All right. So what else do I want to say about that? Um, the other thing too is some of this stuff are false notions. I mentioned on a previous show this math formula or thought called the Pareto principle, and it's a rule of 20s. What that means is that if you look at any given thing, right, 20% of the population will probably be really good at it. Okay, so if you look at your class, who are the 20% whiz kids in math, in basketball, in football, in athletics? Who are the 20% in sport, in music, in theater, right? But you're always going to have kind of this percentage of the population that are really good in those things. Some people have a lot of carryover with that. But the point is that let's say you fall out of that. Does that mean you're not wealthy? It means that you need to find your balance of where you're important, right? And that's a really important thing we do for kids because it sets a foundation to do it in life, right? But this idea of what is wealth, you see, what is important to us. And then as we leave it, then we need to come up with a new notion. And then we need to do it with our partner. So very, very important. All right, so let's take a break. Let's go to the mailbag next. But we'll take a vacation. That's funny. We'll take a commercial break, and I'll be right back.
Mike Zorich, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorich, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorich has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
So, all right. So we are at the mailbag section of the show. And I like this one. This is a tough one. So I could only find really one good question for the mailbag today. So I want to read it to you, but I want to get back to these notions of why this is so important. So this one says, Dr. Don, my spouse and I both work hard. On paper, we're doing well. But lately, we've been living parallel lives. We're constantly busy chasing goals we thought would make us happy, yet I feel more disconnected and more strained than ever. How do you know when you've drifted away from what really matters in a relationship? So this person, they're looking at life and stuff, but it goes back to they're worried about disconnection from the relationship. And how do you get back on track when your definition of success no longer matches? Well, in the fourth section of our show, that fun thing we do to go out and talk to our partner and have a good time. That's what we're going to talk about. That is actually the fourth section. So stay tuned with that. But one thing I want to do is I want to think about the Gottman relationship house to answer your question. So, one of the things I want to do is put up that relationship house for a little bit. And I want to point out that, well, this one is the four horsemen. So we should never do the four horsemen while we're looking for the relationship house, which is what we've got. But if you look at the top of it, you have create shared meaning, and you have make each other's dreams come true. So the first thing they're talking in this is, we're drifting and we don't know what to do. So you always want to get back to really accepting influence from your partner and understand what their meaning of life is and how it shares with yours. Even if it disagrees, you want to talk about it. And then what we can do to make our lives' dreams come true. Well, that's going through life together. And that's why we do this show, because making each other's dreams come true is success, and success in this capacity is wealth. That's wealth. Okay. So one thing I want to do is I'll leave this up a little bit, but one of the things I want to talk about is the 8 major life areas I've talked about. These areas of your life, if something's going wrong, you will really know it in these major life areas, and I'll prove it to you. The first one is spiritual. Okay, spiritual is, like you said, it's a nice walk on a spring day. It's a nice walk on a spring day, holding the hand of your person and really being grateful you're with each other. But it's also maybe for some people religious grounding. It's their own touchstones, what their parents taught them in terms of values, beliefs, ethics, what's right, what's wrong, how we treat our fellow person, how we are a good person in society, how we are a good neighbor. All of those things can fit into that spiritual realm because if we're doing it right, we feel connected to the greater energy. Okay. The next one is our health. If you've ever had a flu where you can't even lift your head off the pillow, I doubt you're going to work and I doubt you're doing much at home, right? So, I mean, health is really important. The third one is our love life, what we're talking about today. It is our love life. The next one's our family, and it could be our kids, but it could also be the family we have that we grew up in, right? We might have other families. We might have people that we're feeling like our work family. Some people have church family, right? Those types of things. The next one is our social life. Who are our buddies? Who do we go through life with? Right? When we have a problem, who do we call? Who's got the truck to help us move the refrigerator? All of those things. So, the social life's important. The next one is job and money. We kind of gravitate to that when we think of wealth, literally. But the last one is fun, hobbies, recreation. When you're 80, what's your bucket list? What do you want to say you did in your life? I've always wanted to go to Europe, right? Okay, well, do you get to do that? Can you say, wow, I remember? And then when you come back with all those wonderful memories, that's wealth. Okay. So the major life areas are something we need to pay attention to. Now, I didn't put a picture up of it. However, I want you to go back to this when you go to the 4th section and you can reference that and write them down. I like you to keep looking through what I talk about today. So please do that for me. So what happens when you drift? What are some of the symptoms? Because that's what they were asking in that question. Well, I put a few. This isn't exhaustive, but what you start to notice symptomatically is a hyperfocus or a preoccupation on certain goals, such as work. We start to get more and more pulled into it. I noticed just right now, because I don't usually talk about things right now, but there was an old movie called The Devil Wears Prada, and I think they have a new one. I haven't seen it, but that movie really talks about this idea of getting pulled into work and what the person who owned the company demands. Okay, kind of interesting stuff. So hyperfocus or preoccupation with certain goals such as work. Another thing is now we overbalance these major life areas: social, health, love life, family life, social life, job and money, or fun. We overbalance with one particular or two particular areas. Now, that preoccupation, because it's drifting us away from balance, leads to anxiety or worry. Anxiety is when we don't think we have the resources to solve the problems, right? So now what do you notice in your body? Well, you got irritability, you got short-temperedness, you got, particularly when something demands our focus away from the principal area, we start to get snippy. Those are symptoms, right? Then what we can start doing in some people is we start medicating with substances like, but not limited to, things like alcohol, marijuana, pornography, overindulgence in sports, overwatching media, and moving more and more away from balance. So now all I do is watch TV, especially on the weekend because there's sports, right? And I'm not paying attention to all the things I really need to, right? So we talk about that. The joke is we interrupt this marriage to bring you the NFL, slang things like golf widow, right? There was a joke about the guy walking in a big city in a dark alley, and somebody pops out of nowhere and puts a gun in his ribs and says, "Your money or your life?" And the guy says, "Well, take my life because I'm saving my money for old age." Tail wags the dog, right? Okay, so you're getting the idea. You're getting the spirit of this, I know. So we have to be careful because if we're noticing some of those things happening, we can say, aha, I got it. We can overshop. We can buy things that give us temporary hits of pleasure that fade quickly. And now we accumulate stuff in our house. And now we're spending money, which bleeds off other money. So we have to work more. And then we're now on the walkalator. We're now on that escalator, like we're running up an escalator, but we can never get to the top, right? Well, think of the energy you would take running up the escalator. It becomes exhausting, right? So these are some of the things that you may notice if some of what we're talking about is getting us away from wealth. So part of what we want to do now is countermeasures. Well, okay, so what do we want to do with that, right? Let me check my time. We want to um, look at what is our mission statement. What do we stand for? What do we want to do? Starting out, what's our mission? From that, we get objectives. Okay, so how are we going to have objectives? Well, if our mission is to be healthier, one of the objectives is to come up with ways that we can behave that make us healthier. And then what are the goals? Well, the goals are we're going to join a gym. We're going to join a running group or a bicycle group, right? Those are the goals to get that done. So mission, objective, and goals. Okay. The other thing too is when you're doing this, you always have to think, what are our grounding beliefs? What do we stand for? What is important to us, right? Those are your values. Those are your ethics. How do we say, look, this is the standard by which I do this? You go to work, you want to do a high quality job, right? You want to learn your job well. Well, those are values and beliefs and ethics. Okay. Now, one thing we're going to get towards later is your partner needs to do this too. So now we're in the individual stage. Before we bring it to the marriage or we bring it to the relationship, we're collecting data on ourselves, right? Remember what I said earlier. If you don't think for yourself, other people will think for you. And believe me, it is not a fair fight. When you ground things in research, it has what we call in my field predictive validity, which means I can predict the future. So if I put this advertising on plus or minus 3%, I can probably predict what the revenue yield for the company I'm advertising for will be. You see this all the time in politics with people, in the polls they're having. They're looking at these numbers for predictive value. Well, they're targeting a population to get a desired outcome. If you don't think for yourself, other people might persuade you in ways that you wish you hadn't. Okay. So think about, again, people often educate us on how to think about money, managing life, financial security, which is good. But like I said, it ultimately has to go through you and what you think as well. Okay. So good. Let's see what else. The other thing I look at, and this is going to really fly at 50,000 feet, but when I look at people in my life who I've lost, grandparents, parents, people who really mattered to me, even like next door neighbors that were older when I was younger. One of the things I noticed about that is a lot of what they did in life and a lot of what was important back then slowly starts to fade away. Okay, it starts to fade away. So the thing is, we remember the essence of the person, right? The essence. And the essence is really that part of us that really we want to carry on in a positive way. That's wealth. So when you think of people like Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Jane Goodall with the gorillas, a lot of what their legacy and their essence is wonderful people. But when you start thinking of people like Caesar Augustus, or you start thinking about people like Napoleon or Hitler, you remember them, but their essence is not good because they are hate-based. So one of the biggest things I can tell you is we need to be love-based. All right. We need to be love-based fundamentally as we go through the rest of our program today, and to set our compass with in loving things that we do, not in other things. And like I said, the things that tear us away can make our attitude more towards resentment and hate and drift. So let's go ahead and take another break. We're going to come back and take all of this information and talk about how to make your relationship really back on track and really the one you want. We'll see you in a second.
Master of words, powerful player, What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Okay, we're back. And one of the things I like to do around this time is to put up my information, my contact information. So I really appreciate all feedback that I get. Feel free to give me messages, ask questions about what you would like to talk about, or if you have something for the mailbag, love it. Some people love to give me just, would you please do a show on this? Because I really don't know what to do about it. I always like to add those. Remember, this is an educational show. It is not psychotherapy. So this is just good information that can really help your relationship, in my opinion. I'm heavily grounded in research from the Gottman Institute. I'm a master trainer for them. So you'll see me reference them more than others. Remember, you can always go to the Gottman Institute. Highly recommend it. And they have tremendous information on how to help your relationship there. And they're well polished. And they have tons of people who follow them, lots of clicks. And just you can find information that might help you. So, all right. So we want to do that. So like I said, put that up, and you can always go back to it when you reference my show with your partner this week. So we kind of get back to the relationship house, that the thing that Gottman has put together to help us understand not only his research, but how to have a sound relationship house, literally. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at that, and we're going to think of those major life areas. Okay. So one thing I'll say about this is you want to visit this on a regular basis. And the major life areas, I often say, what I'd say is on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, how great is your health, right? I'll just use health. There's 8 of them, but health. All right, so it's a 6. All right, well, what makes it a 6? Why isn't it a 10? Write that down. Well, what would you like to have better? So in 30 days, what would you like to see? Well, I want a 7. Okay, what does a 7 look like for you? Because a 7 might look different for me. But what you want to do is you want to put, what's your 30-day goal? And then I would put, what's your 90-day goal? What's your half-year goal? What's your 1-year goal? 1 year from now, how would you like your health to be? Well, some people say, well, in 30 days, I'd like to join a gym and I'd like to be walking a half an hour a day. All right. So those are, mission objective goals. Mission is to stay healthy. Objective is to find ways to do so. And the goal is to literally walk a half an hour a day. So this is how I want you to think about these major life areas. And I want you to look at that relationship house. And you want to look at, love maps. Well, one goal I might have in 30 days is to know 5 things that my partner really likes. And I really want to listen. You see how you can use the relationship house on the goal of marriage. Well, All right. So my relationship is a 6. I want to make it a 7. I'm going to do that. So this is really, really important because one of the ways people drift is they don't pay attention. Think about that. I want to be healthier, but I don't bother to think about what I'm getting at the grocery store. So I don't have something in the grocery store, so I eat fast food. So I eat fast food, and all of a sudden I feel kind of tired, I kind of bloated, and those kind of things. Not that all of that food does that. I don't know much about it, but most people realize that, fast food can be concerning for you. So what we're looking at is ways to stay on the bike trail, ways to stay walking down that path to wealth. And in this case, what is a wealth as it relates to your body or your marriage or your relationship? Okay. So one thing that we want to start doing is developing our own belief system to understand how we stay on that path and how we have that discipline. Discipline, a lot of times, is just the ability to say no to ourselves. No, I'm going to do 5 more sit ups. No, I'm not going to stop now. And we usually have somebody over us and saying, hey, give me 5 more push ups. Or sometimes they yell at us for some reason, but we get to do it. And then we get up and we slap 5. So we did 5 more. Whatever it is, make it fun, make it where you're connected and staying with it. Right. So nowadays, a fad is to talk about influencers. That's our new word. I notice I see this often. That's a fancy word for me of advertising agents, right? So I suppose I could say I'm an influencer because I'm doing this show right now, but I don't put myself in that category because my job isn't to influence you. It's to let you influence yourself, right? I'm not saying, so you need to feel better. So you've got to buy all this product, which is going to make you feel better. I don't do that. What I can say, for example, is there's lots of books at the Gottman Institute that would really help you. But you know what? You may need some other book that works and speaks to you. You're your own person. So I want you to stay into that idea with it, with this idea of how to get better and stay on the bike trail. So the other thing I did say earlier, which I think is true, and this is one of my value sets. Okay, back to my compass. So I might as well talk about this a little bit to model it for you. I tend to want to be love based, right? I want to do something that's love based. When you go to work and you work really hard for your boss, or you really, do a lot to make something happen, you could say, boy, I put a lot of love in that, right? But part of the love is I want to show my boss I appreciate the job, so I want to do a really good job for them. That's love based. You see what I'm saying? Same way, I want to do something nice for my partner today because I want my partner to have a better attitude in life, right? I want them to feel enriched and loved by me. This is important. When we start getting into drift and we start getting into resentment and we start getting into negativity and the 4 horsemen and arguing when we're flooding and stuff, those kind of things get us away from being love based. Now, I'm not saying they're hate based, but they can go there. So hate based is actually a ratchet up from those negative things, but they definitely cause drift. And then when you get into hate, you're really, running towards negativity. Okay. So just really important as far as, what we're trying to set up here for you to be successful. Okay. The other thing is back to love. You need to be seen by your partner, and your partner needs to see you through the lens of unconditional love. Okay, unconditional love. So when we look at the relationship house again, you see create shared meaning and make each other's dreams come true. Well, that's knowing how to do that, right? And going through life with friendship, which is really understanding what makes them happy, and making sure we have those 86% successful bid towards those connection with our partner during the day. Little bids, some people like to get, still do post-its, right? Or they send little text, and they are big, just thinking about you, how you doing, right? Hope your day is going well. Just little bids for connection that are so important, and letting our partner know that we have a lot of fondness and admiration for them. That's love based. But I always say love is that fondness, admiration, loyalty, respect, adoration, right? And reciprocity, back and forth. See, very important. So some of those things are those foundations, those rudiments I talk about that really can make that happen. Okay. So part of what we want to do when we're talking about goals and missions and all of those things, we want to be able to talk to our partner to say, what's important to you? How are we doing in this major life area? Right? Some people may say, we haven't planned a vacation yet. We're already almost May, which is when this episode's airing. And boy, it'd be nice to do something in August. I think we got to get going. Well, what's the purpose of going on a vacation? To share life with your person, maybe. Well, that's spiritual. And then, that highlight reel, that snapshot. So when you close your eyes, you still remember it. My phone, for some reason, will give me pictures from past vacations. It just kind of does it randomly. I didn't set it up, but I'll look at that and go, oh, I remember that vacation. Oh, that was a good day, right? Those kind of things. What is wealth? Wealth are those memories, right? Wealth are those things that we did that we can just go, oh, boy, that's living. That's life. So we want that. And that is wealth. It may not be $1 billion in the bank, but it's certainly wealth. Okay. So, looking at not only that, but what is fun with your partner, looking at, your friends. Do you have couples friends? Do you have individual friends? Do you get a chance to go see your individual friends? Right. Let me take my time. There you go. We see our individual friends, but we come back and we tell our partner all about it. And then we have that wealthy experience of enjoying those dear friends we hadn't seen for 10 years. Or maybe we do something in, every year we get together and we do this or that with some old friends. Or maybe we have those traditions I talk about. Maybe all the family gets together for the 4th of July or Memorial Day and that sort of thing. One big tradition that usually is honored a lot, and I consider wealth, is when we get together for Mother's Day. Because Mother's Day, a lot of times we really want to pay attention to all of the things moms do to make our lives wonderful. Now, my mom's gone, but I can tell you when Mother's Day comes around, I can think of all of those times that I did nice things for my mom on Mother's Day, or I remember how great my mom was. And I sit back and I think of all those things that we not only did together, but ways we laughed together and our rapport and our connection together. That's wealth. That's wealth. And part of that is I might think of what we did specifically on Mother's Day. I always had certain things that I really did. Always tried, if I could, to go and see my mom in person. Sometimes people can't do that, but that was one of my goals, right? And that was really a nice thing. My mom, it was a really big deal to go to church in the morning. So I always made sure to get there the night before so I could attend that with her because that was a big deal. It was spiritual and it was nice for me. And part of my wealth is now still remembering those days that we went and shared that together. And then in my family, we would come home and my dad would make breakfast for us and we'd have a brunch. And that was the first half of our day. And I wish I could go back and do them, but that's wealth. That's what's so important with building those memories and having those times. And, back to what I said with kids, kids spell love, Time. Well, that was time I spent with my mom. And it was just really great. Right. It's funny because Father's Day, and I'll talk a little bit about Father's Day again this year too, we celebrate it differently. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. But we do it in a way that relates to dad versus mom. And mom, we celebrate in a lot of ways, right? One thing I will say about that for the guys listening, because Mother's Day is coming up, make sure you do a lot to let the kids celebrate mom because moms know that you put that effort in. Maybe the kids are bringing the pancakes in bed, but guess how the pancakes got made? Oh, the kids did it. Yeah, but dad was watching. Right. Making sure the house didn't get burned down, making sure the pancakes didn't burn, making sure the kids didn't get burned. And then, all of those little things that we know mom liked were on that plate. Well, dad really oversees that. So that's important. When dads don't do that, we have regrettable incidences the next day. Right. So, back to love maps. What is a special day for mom? Not for us, but for mom. We got to think about those things. So that's what I mean by love. All right, so we're going to take in our last segment today a way to put all this together so you two can talk and see how close you are to the bike trail and how do you keep going down the road. We'll see you shortly.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Okay, now we're here at our fourth segment. This is my fun exercise section. Remember, refer to the other sections when you're doing this with your person. But this is what I want you to do this week. Okay, first thing, get yourself, your computer out or pencil and paper, however you do it. But plan a time for you and your person to meet. Okay, first thing. Next, your preparation. Look at your major life areas, the ones that I talked about earlier, right? And think of where you see these in terms of your life goals. So for your health, are you on pitch? Are you doing it well? Spiritually, are you doing things that you are grounded in that helps you be spiritual? What are you doing for fun? Are you working so much that you never have fun and never take breaks? So I want you to, take a look at those major life areas and see where they are. I like to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. It just makes it easy to start. Right now, if you're below a 3, it's pretty much getting to be a bit of a barn fire there. So those you want to get up to acceptable ranges, right? So you want to try to be at least at a 5, but you need to define what a 5 is. You start getting into things that are bad. So let's say you really, really, really have a bad flu and no fooling. You're probably a 2 in your health department, right? So what you want to do then is say, I just want to get well again. So now, okay, I'm well again. What am I? Oh, I'm about a 5 or 6, but I'm a little more out of shape than I want to be. Think like that. Okay. So then the next thing you want to do is, where do I want to be in 30 days? Where do I want to be, say, in 3 months? Just stay to that right now. You can do a half a year or a year, but let's be simple. Okay. Now the next thing I want you to do is get a little bit on the 50,000 feet thing, what I call the existential side of things. Ask yourself how life has changed over time for you. Just stop where you are like a snapshot. And what do you notice is different? You see, what do you notice? Let's say you used to play piano all the time. You go, my gosh, I haven't played piano in 3 years. Well, how did that happen? I'll tell you where that happens a lot is when you have kids. Kids, you look up and, oh my gosh, the things I used to do, I never do anymore. So the tail's wagging the dog, right? Now, again, there's a lot of love there. It's love-based because you're giving all that time and energy to your kids, but you have to balance all of these. Still have to balance them. So very, very important. So ask yourself how time has changed. The other thing too is I want you to come back as a touchstone for spirituality. Now, again, like I said, I tend to do the religious-based thing because it's a structure and it's easy for me. And it makes me a lot more able to kind of see a higher energy that makes me say, look, I need to follow a path that's proven. And that's proven for me. It may not be for you. So again, I'm not a influencer. I know a lot of people that are, but I do say that is one thing that works for me. So now with these major life goals, have we drifted in our values, beliefs, ethics, and what's happened? in life? What's happened? Because some people will say, I can't believe me. What's happened to me? I used to have all these values and ethics, and all of a sudden I really am doing things that I would never have considered doing. This job has really gotten me off course. Slow down. Just evaluate it, right? Just evaluate it. Now, you've done this, right? Have your partner do the same. So they're out doing the same thing with these same questions that you are, okay? So now I want you to share what you both have on paper, but then I want you to discuss how you need to right size these major life areas, how to get them in the field of play. So if you notice, I really haven't been seeing my friends like I want to. I've really been working too much overtime. I really noticed that we stopped doing date night. Oh my gosh, I can't remember when the last time we went out on a date. That's where this is pulling this down to a 4 or a 3 for me on the relationship side of things. So all of a sudden you're both talking about where you're noticing things aren't good. The other thing, and this is really cool, you'll find it out. Your partner will be able to give you some of the things that are hurting them. They have that pain. Well, honey, I really notice we don't go on date night anymore. And I just really miss that. And I feel like I don't get to see you when we don't do that. Now, you notice that wasn't a criticism, it was a complaint, but it was a gentle complaint. So there's no horseman, but hey, how do we fix that? See, now the relationship is showing up to help you. Very important. Okay. So now let's do it this way. Pick one area that you really want to address in the next 30 days. So of all of those 8 major life areas for each of you, which one you really want to make better? Okay. So then what you want to start to do is, back to what I said, mission, objective, goals. So what are our goals for the next 30 days to make that better? Well, if we did this, I would probably rate this from a 6 to a 7. And a 7 would look like 2 times a week, we go out and we walk together for a half an hour and we hold hands. And you know what? We talk. We don't talk about anything heavy, but we just talk and just enjoy the spring, right? Complain about the mosquitoes, whatever it is, but do it together. So that is that spiritual stuff. And then what I want you to do at the end of that, let me check my time, is I want you to make sure that in the next 30 days, you do this meeting again and you evaluate this one major life area and see if it's better. Then, and this is really cool, if it is better, talk about how you feel better, not how you think better. But you know what, honey? Now that we've been walking like that, I kind of want to do one more day if it's okay. And I really feel more connected to you. I really feel like I look forward to having that experience and feeling that joy that I'm feeling with that. Okay, you know what? We ought to do another one. Let's pick another major life area and do this. Or when you do your State of the Union meeting, you say, hey, I'm noticing that this one major life area isn't working well for us. It's dropping, right? Like stock dropping in finances, right? So that's one of the things that we can do. But I notice if we aren't doing it together, it's like unplugging the battery or unplugging the cord from your computer. All of a sudden, the screen dims because it has to go into battery mode. We kind of go into battery mode in our own way when we feel disconnected from our partner, and drifting away from these major life areas not only drains that, but it's going to start affecting your long-term and even short-term wealth. So that's what we want to do. Let me check my time. You know what? I'm Dr. Don Allen. This is all about relationships, working towards ideal marriage and loving, lasting relationships. Thank you for joining me. Please do this episode. Contact me to give me good things to do on the air. I'll see you next Wednesday, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Thanks for listening. Take care.
While All About Relationships is educational and entertaining, it is not a substitute for therapy, counseling, or professional advice, but an informative space for learning and growth. So tune in each week for an engaging and reliable approach to your relationships, ensuring viewers with practical tools to create deeper connections in their daily lives. Whether tackling conflict resolution, emotional intimacy, or family dynamics, this show is your go-to resource for anyone looking to foster healthier, happier relationships in a supportive and lighthearted environment. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern.